the changing decade of the 1950s, Rebel Without a Cause tells the story of three isolated, misunderstood, rebellious teens over the course of a 24-hour period. The main character, Jim Stark, played by James Dean, wants nothing more than to be a man and fit in, but his submissive father and nagging mother struggle to understand him, constantly moving him from place to place. Jim's future love interest, Judy, played by Natalie Wood, strives for the affection of her deliberately distant father and gives in to peer pressure in order to fit in with the popular, if unsavory, crowd, including Buzz, her gang leader boyfriend. The last part of the troubled trio is John, the misguided son of divorced parents who is raised by his African-American nanny, goes by the nickname Plato, and meets a tragic end at the hands of the police. All three of these frustrated, anguished, and identity-seeking teenagers cross paths when they land in the juvenile sector of the police station for their defiant actions and are prime examples of the rebelliousness that resulted from the generation gap and the suffocating conformity of 1950s suburban society.
How can a guy grow up in a circus like that?
Beats me, Jim. But they do.
While the story itself is purely fictional, the events and emotions of the different characters are similar to those of real-life teenagers and parents in the 1950s. The frustration and isolation felt by Jim, Judy, and Plato with their families was shared by the insubordinate adolescents of the 50s, as dysfunctional family life led many to look for acceptance elsewhere and act out violently. These sentiments were the foundation of the counterculture movement of the 1960s. Even though the three main characters are made up, their realistic emotions cause many to relate to their troubles, making them seem more realistic despite some discrepancies. Jim feels trapped because his weak-willed father didn't teach him how to be a man.
I don't ever want to be like him.
Chicken?
When it comes time to act like a man, Jim tries to be responsible until someone calls him chicken. Then he feels he has no choice but to fight to protect his honor, and rather than deal with these issues, his vain, hypocritical parents just move on to the next town, claiming it's a fresh start. The vanity and hypocrisy of Jim's parents reflect the time period because all Americans were putting on a fake smile and pretending as if the Cold War wasn't going on and nuclear attack wasn't an imminent threat when it was one of their greatest underlying fears. It was all about appearances and having the ideal family, and Jim was seen as a delinquent. It's not until the final tragic scene that Jim's father finally tries to be the man that Jim always wanted, a detail that, while comforting, was somewhat unlikely. Judy, on the other hand, wants more attention from her highly critical, distant father and runs off to her delinquent friends whenever he refuses to indulge her or insult her for wearing lipstick. Adolescence is a transitioning time, and it's understandable how some people, like Judy, have trouble making the transition from undivided love and attention to independence. Judy wanted attention, and if she couldn't get it from her family, she wanted to be popular, even if it meant hanging out with the wrong crowd. After her boyfriend died at the Chickie Run, she found comfort and acceptance in Jim and Plato, a connection that became blatantly obvious when the three of them were hiding out in an abandoned mansion pretending to be a family. Fed up with their own families, many teens of the 1950s saw escape and acceptance in other crowds, so the trio's family-like bond would be accurate to the time. Last but not least, Plato had abandonment issues from the lack of attention he received from his divorced, never-present parents. He took to drastic measures, like killing puppies with his mother's gun, in a futile attempt to get their attention. When he met Jim, he immediately looked up to him and began to see him as the father figure he never had. However, his newfound acceptance is short-lived because when he wakes up alone in the mansion and Buzz's former gang members begin tormenting him, he pulls out the gun and starts shooting at anything that moves, running to the planetarium for protection. Jim was able to calm Plato down and discreetly remove the gun's ammunition, but in his flightiness, Plato gets spooked and draws the empty gun, prompting the police to open fire. The tragedies that happened to Plato throughout his life definitely had negative consequences, but his ultimate death seems a bit hyperbolic for the sake of theatrics.
Hey. Hey. It's all over. The world ended.
What does he know about man alone?
Overall, the movie was an accurate depiction of family life, clothing, school, relationships, and teenage emotions and disobedience in the 1950s, although the ultimate outcome was a bit of a stretch, as well as the fact that all of this happened in one 24-hour period, from the police station to the planetarium.
If I had one day when I didn't have to be all confused, and I didn't have to feel that I was ashamed of everything,